So yeah, you ready to talk roadmap?
We can talk roadmap first. I got a couple other questions that I'd like to toss at you. So, really, dealer's choice, man. What do you want to jump into first?
The roadmap's pretty exciting, and I think if any of those questions bring up WoW, the roadmap's going to really show you. Like I started to
Okay.
kind of foreshadow with like this holiday event hadn't been updated in 10 years, and is that something they really outlined like a lot of what they plan to tackle over the next 12 to 14 months,
Okay.
and I think it changes my perspective on what they're willing to invest in World of Warcraft
Okay.
a little bit.
Yeah, and the questions that I have generally for you in terms of just like little breakout topics that if we don't get to them, if this ends up evolving into like a bigger conversation, I'll always ask those later because I got some numbers on certain games that I know that you're a massive fan on, and they're looking great, but we haven't followed up with those. So we'll see if we can get to that in today's show, or see if Chad is able to distract us somewhat and get us on another topic itself. So with that being said, yeah, I think essentially it makes a lot of sense right now to go ahead and jump into the World of Warcraft roadmap. I can't even spell it here in the banner, but we'll go with it. Welcome in, everyone. Today, Chris, actually, you've gone over this a little bit, so you're going to be educating me because ultimately, when it comes down to a roadmap, I was surprised that you texted me that they actually have a roadmap. I thought that was something fascinating because I've always personally viewed roadmaps as a replacement for trust. Final Fantasy XIV, I would argue, doesn't need a roadmap because their actions are the roadmap. But Yoshi P did sit down and say, hey, we've got a 10-year plan and here's some of the bullet points, but not necessarily like this is when this is happening. So if we jump into the screen itself, for all of the details that you have shared, why don't you walk me through it? Where do we like we start at the beginning? Like, what do I need to know as somebody who is more of a Diablo player than a World of Warcraft player?
So back in February of 2022, Naoki Yoshida gave us what he called a 10-year roadmap for the next 10 years of Final Fantasy XIV, but it effectively mostly focused on the next 2 years, and it reminded us of just how predictable Final Fantasy is, and him in that role as producer is how he published that letter. He is both the director and the producer, but that was really a producer's role. This is coming from the producer of World of Warcraft on both the classic and the retail side, Holly Longdale. And so that is who is publishing this.
Okay.
And she is going over effectively what all we're going to get over the next year. I cannot think of any time in the future that they have been this literal with what they want outside of maybe sometimes at BlizzCons where they've talked about before an expansion gets here, what their intentions are for that expansion long term. And so when we talk about like how often are there patches, how many patches will there be, what's going to be in those patches as a rough outline, obviously knowing that surprises and stuff need to be in there as well. That general foundational framework, that is something I associate with Final Fantasy XIV and not with World of Warcraft. So this is going to have the highlights are kind of in this first section here. And if you scroll down, there's a nice image that you can pull up, and we'll kind of go over that.
Oh, yeah. That I mean, okay. Honestly, I'm not gonna dog it. This is a beautiful look, just right from a design perspective. I immediately understand what is happening. Go ahead.
So we are in Dragonflight, and they wanted to lay out the next year, and they wanted to kind of update us a little bit. So first, early next year, in still the very cold months, the remainder of winter, we will be going into patch 10.0.5. This is your half patch that starts to drop all the things that finish up kind of rounding out the expansion experience. And it begins with a new thing called the Trading Post. Since Final Fantasy XIV is the game that you and I have the most time in together, as overlap, those are the terms I'll be using. Imagine a Moogle Tombstone event where you can acquire past items. Those are items that maybe were tied to real money transactions, either sold on the store or a subscription loyalty thing like the Falcon going on in the current Moogle Tombstone event, as well as just long lost cosmetics.
Okay.
Things that maybe are acquirable through past events or maybe are no longer acquirable through running past events. And so that's mounts, minions, wearable gear, whatever. And that is now entering what they're calling a trading post. A trading post is effectively a month-long rotating set of things that will function kind of like Wondrous Tales,
Mhm.
where it will have a set of things you can do. That set of things will vary from current content all the way past to specific things tied to the event or just goofy old content. And effectively, you will get a certain amount of trading post currency for just being a member of the game. As long as your account is active at any time during that month, you will get the same amount. Everybody gets it. But then you will also be able to earn more by doing some of these. But just like Wondrous Tales, there are more things that you can do than rewards you can obtain, which means you have choices. So it doesn't really matter kind of what you do, as long as you do enough of it. And so you're not going to feel like, oh gosh, now I have to do PvP. Just like with Wondrous Tales, if you don't want to do the
Right.
PvP,
Yeah.
then don't
Options.
do it. And so that is the trading post. That is a major piece of content. And the fact that they are going to be tying things that are no longer acquirable or acquirable through the store to this are a big deal. That's a big change that I think will really excite people. And it's not tied to something where, okay, but effectively it's still just gold. So effectively it's just a token. No, it is tied to, if you play the game, you can acquire things that were previously acquirable through maybe the trading card game or something like that, which is really cool.
So
After
yeah, go
this,
ahead.
yeah.
No, I was gonna say. So how I'm reading this personally is that obviously winter and spring, and then before the summer update, that's when you're gonna see kind of the .1 patch, right? So
Correct.
ultimately, my math on this estimated from release is you're looking at 5 to 6 months for the update. There's nothing wrong with that. Like, just communicate when it can be expected, then deliver on that expectation, because whether you have a lot of content, little content, it's just so that gamers can know when the next piece is coming. Especially from our perspective as content creators, one of the things that makes it really easy to talk about games that have consistent updates and schedules is to say, hey, when a player voices their frustration, because that's going to happen regardless, that frustration can be answered with, well, here's when you can start to expect that. Maybe now's the time to take a break or focus in on another piece of content. And so one of the problems with, Shadowlands, from my perspective, was literally the massive gap and unknown dates. The dates are being leaked and inferred by content creators literally based off of what's currently on the PTR, and so then you get into summer and fall, and then about a 5 to 6 month until patch 10.2, which looks like that is the meat, the big serving. But even in between then, you're still seeing, here's what's coming, here's what's expected. And here's the thing. I think that obviously subject to change. This does I wouldn't say that this is everything that's on that list, but this is what they can what they feel like they can commit to and deliver on. And then if things get done and extra things get done, you'll also see those, and that's where you see meaty patch notes.
And they set the tone, right? They tell you the sort of things that the focus. And so Final Fantasy XIV has a 4-month patch cadence instead of 6, but the odd numbered and even numbered kind of marry together as a pair. And for many things, such as item level, where certain things actually feel like you have to make it through both an even and an odd to see a reset. And so in some ways, Final Fantasy XIV is on an 8-month cycle. And during that cycle, you have 2 major patches and 2 half patches. And so you kind of have 4 chapters to a patch rotation where it really feels like it hits the reset at 0.2 and at 0.4. It somewhat hits the reset at 0.1, 3, and 5. And so there's this ebb and flow. And so they are talking about these different things. The white and gray transmogs, for example, in that winter update, that would be like finding out that they're going to expand the glamour dresser. And so it's the sort of thing that the focus is. It's not an exhaustive thing. And so the fact that for casual players, they included heritage armor, which would be a glamour based thing. And they talked about kind of different world events, holiday updates, holiday refresh. As we talk about these things, that says there's something for casuals in here. For hardcore players, obviously the major patches are the driving thing, but in summer we're getting a mega dungeon, which kind of ties back to, that's very similar to like an exploratory, that's like a Bozja dungeon or something like that. There's not an exact parallel or a trial fight or something. It's their Kara style thing. So telling people where this stuff is, and the fact that in the updates, they've also said, in addition to this, not stated on this slide, you're going to be getting story beats with cutscenes and narrative explorations. You're going to be getting class updates and bounces to things like PvP. That this is not an exhaustive list, as you noted, but this is kind of the theme of what each of these patches are. So you can say, that really looks like the kind of patch that I'm going to want to set aside a lot of time for, or you know what, next fall, that's going to be a really good time for me to go focus on this other game. and come back. And that could be another game within the Blizzard launcher. That could be a totally independent game. You know, these games are developed by devs that don't just play this game. Hopefully all World of Warcraft devs enjoy World of Warcraft, but hopefully that's not all they enjoy. And so if they enjoy other movies, books, or just other MMOs or other games in general, this can tell you which of those seasons is going to have a little more of that time for you to go do that.
Yeah, I can see and feel that for sure. I think that's also one of the important things about playing other games is to kind of get other various different perspectives. But at the same time, it's important that you also play your own game. One of the big kind of defining factors that Yoshi P brought in for Final Fantasy 14 was like, you guys are playing this game. Like we're like, because if you're having a piece of frustration, so are the players. If you're running up against, you want to also then be able to understand the feedback that is coming your way. Because if you're not experiencing it firsthand, development making a game, especially because I've worked with devs like at Gearbox, right? And one of the things with them is that they're like, yeah, I never actually got around to playing Borderlands because I was working on this feature and this quest so much, and you're just literally living in it, breathing it, 5, 6, 7 months. By the time it comes around to enjoying it, you're just like, no, man, I'm good, dude. But MMOs take on a whole different kind of personality.
This also means that effectively when a patch goes live, the PTR will already be basically ready to go live for the next patch. So it'll be back to back to back to back. And so the frequency with this is very large compared to maybe some of the past expansions, especially some of the more recent ones that have been considered failures in some of the community's eyes. This also starts to outline like much more precisely what'll be in there. As kind of Chad is noting, when they've outlined things at BlizzCon, it's always been this like distant fever dream. And it's like, man, we'd love to get to stuff like this. When the expansion launches, there'll be these systems and those systems will get updated. But that's like when Naoki Yoshida says, yeah, and Island Sanctuary is something that will release with the expansion, but there will be more of it later. And then that's the end of the statement, as opposed to when he came in and said, and we have specific patches like 0.4 and 0.5 that we expect major updates to Criterion.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean there won't be things along the way.
Right.
We expect major updates in 0.4 and 0.5 with whole new maps to that. And so telling us exactly when you're thinking. So I think that's really good. I think tying these to seasonal releases gives them flex. If the patch cycle between .x 0.5 and .x 0.7 needs to be 2 weeks longer than 0.7 in the patch, that's fine. Even Final Fantasy has a little bit of shift here and there, and some of that shift is scheduled and some is not. But just setting a rough cadence, this is really, really good. And I think it helps make the game a lot more predictable, which just makes it easier to consume. Yeah. It makes it easier to budget. It is a live service game. And so expansions live and die, not just off of having good launches, but that second half. You got to do the right. 2 years well, and you got to do the launch well. And they're both big. They're both huge undertakings.
So we
really need to do both well.
So with this schedule that we were looking at, obviously 2023, 2024, then you could almost expect season 4, 10.3, along with another version of the roadmap coming that would lead them into, whatever comes, 11.0, whatever comes after Dragonflight, which then also would get people very excited. So I would venture to bet, are they having a BlizzCon this year? Is that been confirmed for 2023?
It has been confirmed that there will be a BlizzCon in the works. I don't think that obligates it to being late 2023 if they want to move it to early 2024, if that's what works scheduling wise. So I don't know that a calendar year has been nailed down. But Mike Ybarra did say that there will be another BlizzCon. I would expect it to be 2023, but that was not the explicit statement. The explicit statement is that they are bringing BlizzCon back and that there will be more details in the future. I think people will assume that is 2023 and that is around the time that is typically BlizzCon in the past. But like I said, if they want to move that to being a spring thing, then they could move that to spring of 24. And I don't think that makes Mike's statements a lie. He's the president of all of Blizzard, and so he has to kind of talk vaguely in his annual letter about all the franchises. He's trying to, and he's written down the 10 adjectives that, the year spoke to him. And then he divided those out across the games. And so then you're looking at the adjectives he chose for Overwatch and the adjectives he chose for Diablo Immortal. And you're like, are those the best ones? And it's like, he's trying to write a poetic letter. But yes, that is where we have that statement. It is a single line in a letter from the president of Blizzard that there will be BlizzCon coming back.
Yeah. Now, there's two comments I kind of want to highlight. One here on YouTube, which I'm highlighting for Caramac, and the other one from Earth Demon over on Twitch. Earth, if you feel like you can hop over on that, I can highlight it and drop it up on the video form, but I'll try to my best to narrate that as well. But if you guys are watching this as a part of a highlight, be sure to smash that like button and subscribe for more of our MMO discussion breakouts and more. If you do so, and I'll toss in a picture of an awesome dragon. I'm assuming the editor is going to do that. Well, if the editor does, be sure to say thank you, Chris L, in the comments below, so that he is a freaking legend. I'm going to just start throwing those out. We'll see if we can have some fun. So appreciate you guys liking the streams and the content. But Caramac says, I brought up an interesting point where I'm saying roadmaps are a replacement for trust, and they feel like the trust for Blizzard has been eroded over the last several years. I'd go beyond just two. It just was something kind of where, if you think of trust as a bank, where it's like you deposit trust and you withdraw trust. A lot of trust was deposited in Blizzard and WoW. And then eventually they started kind of drawing down on that. They started kind of drawing from that trust, and everybody has a certain, kind of limit, a certain balance, if you will. But do you feel, Chris, that a roadmap in this case is also a replacement for some of the trust that has been eroded, or how would you describe it?
I do think it's a way to build back trust really quickly, to basically put up a scoreboard, but it's not a guarantee. I think replacement as just a singular word choice also kind of implies like you don't have to have trust. You can just do roadmaps. But if you put a roadmap out here, this is also a scorecard.
Yeah.
And so if they go 1 for 6 on this, now they're worse.
Yeah.
So it gives us, it says, I don't really have time to think about what Blizzard would have to do to earn my trust. Okay, well, we plan to do 6 things. All right. And then you look back at the end of 2023 and you got 6.
Mm-hmm. There you go.
So that's a big deal.
Yeah. I echo your sentiment exactly, because it is literally that scorecard, because if you do not deliver, you have a visual representation saying you're going to do this. To highlight New World, for example, who put out a roadmap, they hit everything out of the park minus one feature, which the devs came out and apologized for. It was on the PTR, but based off of feedback, they're like, it's just not ready. And it ended up missing and falling into the February timeframe, which is a point against it. Like when you sit down and say, this is what we can deliver, and what they need to do here is bat 1,000 with the next roadmap that they've released, and hopefully they do. That's essentially kind of what they're doing here, and what World of Warcraft needs to deliver, because this is their promise. This is them saying, and again, you don't put everything on here. You don't put the kitchen sink. You don't say, hey, we're including absolutely every little change that we're going to make. Now we're saying this is what we can do based off of our team, our trajectory, our velocity. And again, if they don't hit like 100% out of the park, but they get 90%, like that's still like a passing grade where you're like, oh, great. Because then they can come back and say, listen, this is what happened based off of y'all's feedback. We made a change. But it's about that communication. And as that goes on, the question ends up becoming, is the roadmap necessary or not? Would Final Fantasy XIV specifically need to detail a roadmap for you, Chris?
Not for me, but I'm not the only player of Final Fantasy. And so I think that, I regularly see people watch the Part 2 live letter and they learn things that were stated not only in the Part 1 live letter, but have been true of every odd numbered or even numbered patch respectively for quite some time. So the other advantage of this is you don't know where you're at on the trust cycle with a particular player.
That's true.
So if you have somebody who just switched to this from another MMO and they're feeling, maybe they left the other MMO because their raid group fell apart or that game frustrated them or something like that. And so they're kind of in an injured state, and they come in and you say, hey, welcome. These are what you can expect. This is what is typical of us. That helps them know what to expect. And so I think there's a value in it always. I think that's why Naoki Yoshida, I think that's why he outlines what we talked about previously and what to expect from the future every time we hear from him. You and I, that's a great chance to get up and go get a cup of coffee or, refill our water or, eat something, because it's not new information. But there is a value in it always. It continually says you have a plan. This is the plan, and it doesn't obligate you. They didn't say that mega dungeon is going to have exactly 13 bosses with 113 unique pieces of loot. Like,
Very true. Yeah.
you're not drilling yourself down to where halfway through design you realize we want to change something about that mega dungeon, and we can't.
Right.
So you're keeping it vague enough that the developers aren't getting handcuffed by some beautiful marketing image, but you're just genuinely saying you're paying us monthly for this game. This is what you need to be excited about.
Mm-hmm.
So especially with subscription-based games, I think this is wildly valuable,
Yeah.
to help outline what am I paying for, especially when you have something in the store that allows me to buy more than 1 month of subscription at a time.
And
Why am I
rewards you for
buying
doing
six
that.
months? Why
Right.
am I buying 6 months if you're not going to update the game? It feels like I've been lied to if I don't get a patch for 5 months out of 6 months of pre-purchase subscription time. And so I think this is a really big step in saying if you're looking at maybe making a purchase with 6 months of subscription time, this is what you can expect on over a 6 month time period.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um,
Exactly. And there's obviously no dates on this, so however you want to define winter and spring, I'm assuming the winter update's coming pretty soon.